Audiobook, Cultivation World. She only won a farm in peace. Book 6. Facing demonic beasts and seeking a new settlement. Voiced by Ava from Clipchamp software. One book has a total of chapters 58 to 66. Total 15,000 words. Song of Book Series. Cultivation. A fleeting dream, a misty path. A cultivator from the Tonguz sect flew over. He saw Ye Jun gripping her pitch-black spear, her eyes fixed on him with a clear intent to strike back. So, this fat ant has realized my plan, he thought. With a smug grin and an incredibly mocking tone, he sneered. Fat ant, why aren't you running anymore? Out of spiritual energy already? Trying to claw your way out of death, hoping for a miracle. As he spoke, he swept his divine sense over Ye Jun to assess her strength and quickly discovered she was only at the 8th level of chi refining. He knew that most cultivators in the Tonguz region were low-level rogue cultivators. Even so, with his foundation establishment strength, he still exercised caution. He had no intention of being toppled in a ditch by carelessness. He was feeling confident, even excited at the thought of victory. With a much higher cultivation level than Ye Jun, he began to wonder what kind of treasures might be hidden in her possession. Though he had access to resources from his sect, that didn't mean outer disciples of Tonguz sect would pass up on useful low-grade items from rogue cultivators. These low-level rogue were like walking pouches filled with surprises, and opening those pouches was always a thrill. Just by looking at Ye Jun, he could tell she was wealthy. The bamboo leaf-shaped flying treasure she stood on alone was worth dozens of low-grade spirit stones, far more luxurious than the ragged rogue cultivators he had preyed upon before. Although he had already made quite a fortune exploiting ordinary rogue cultivators, windfalls like this, prey that brought their own treasure right to his door, were too sweet to ignore. He looked at Ye Jun again. Though she was dressed as a man, he could vaguely tell she was female, a girl with a taste for men's clothing. A twisted type, he thought. He licked his lips, his eyes gleaming with a sinister, hungry light. Ye Jun stared back at the unfamiliar cultivator. A cold sweat formed on her back. This feeling, it was just like back then during that low-tier secret realm venture. She had only fought once in her life, and she had lost that battle, even with the help of an experience card. She had spent a lot of time practicing spear techniques since then, but she severely lacked real combat experience. That lack gnawed at her now, stretching her anxiety taut. She didn't know if she could win this time. She didn't wait for him to finish his arrogant speech. As he stared at her, speaking with that grotesque mix of contempt and mockery, Ye Jun moved. In a flash, she activated a flurry of attack talismans and hurled them at him. Caught off guard, the man was surprised by the sudden barrage. Water arrows, fireballs, earth spears, lightning strikes, all heading his way. He shouted, "My money! That's all my money flying at me!" He panicked. "I need to end this fast. Pin her down before she burns any more of those valuable talismans." He hadn't expected such fierce resistance. Most rogue cultivators were incredibly weak. Combat arts and techniques were monopolized by powerful sects and clans, sold at outrageous prices. Few rogue cultivators could afford any of it. That's why, when facing high-level opponents, they usually cowered, groveled, or simply fled. Chasing them down, torturing them bit by bit, then killing them. That was the fun part. But Ye Jun's counterattack? It shattered his expectations, and it irritated him deeply. Still, he wasn't too concerned. Sooner or later, she would be at his mercy. He sneered at the wave of low-grade talismans flying toward him. With ease, he dodged them and countered by slicing through the air with his sword chi. Countless arcs of sword energy, formed from his spiritual power, slashed toward the incoming talismans and wiped them out. Realizing that her level 1 talismans were too weak to harm him, Ye Jun quickly activated her level 2 talismans, ones capable of injuring a foundation establishment cultivator. But instead of throwing them immediately, She launched another round of level 1 talismans in rapid succession, using them as a smokescreen. Hide for the level 2 talismans. Chapter 59. The mysterious cultivator was surely at the foundation establishment stage, which made him underestimate Ye Jun's level 1 talismans. When his sword chi collided with the attacks from the talismans, both sides cancelled each other out. However, Ye Jun had interwoven level 2 talismans densely into her assault. Combined with the enemy's arrogance, the level 2 attack managed to break through. By the time the cultivator realized what was happening, it was too late. The talisman strike had already landed. Ye Jun felt a surge of joy as she stared into the thick cloud of smoke. Suddenly, a streak of sword chi flew toward her, forcing her to dodge swiftly in midair. The cultivator shouted furiously, blaming Ye Jun for damaging the outer layer of his robe. "You damn insect! Do you know how expensive this robe is?" Ye Jun didn't care. She activated another level 2 talisman and launched it at him. This time, the talisman summoned water swords. 5 of them flew rapidly toward him. His expression darkened slightly at the incoming attack. He quickly activated a defensive talisman, though regret flashed in his eyes. A ruthless gleam appeared. He was already planning the cruel torment Ye Jun would suffer once he captured her. Level 2 talismans were not as weak as level 1. They had limited homing capabilities. Dodging alone wouldn't be enough. The only way to counter them was to destroy them with equal force. The cultivator unleashed more sword chi, aiming to neutralize Ye Jun's water sword talismans. Ye Jun realized her cultivation was still lower, making it impossible to sustain an airborne battle with a superior opponent. Without hesitation, she activated her experience card. Instantly, her cultivation surged by 10 levels, reaching foundation establishment level 18, equal to that of the Qingge sect cultivator. But she wasn't aware of this. She simply believed that the power boost would improve her odds. If she failed, she would undoubtedly be killed on the spot. With her spiritual energy overflowing, she used an invisibility talisman and darted behind the cultivator, striking with her spear. In an attempt to ambush him, the cultivator squinted when he saw the strange black card in Ye Jun's hand. He didn't know what it was, but still didn't take her seriously. He believed she was only at level 8. As he squinted and fired sword chi to counter the incoming talismans, Ye Jun had already vanished from his sight. Unable to locate her, the cultivator spread out his divine sense to scan the area. He knew that if she used a level 2 invisibility talisman, even his divine sense would be ineffective. He could only hope she was using a level 1 talisman. He couldn't believe a mere rogue cultivator could own so many valuable treasures. Watching her squander high-level talismans made his heart ache. Just then, Ye Jun had already flown behind him. Her barrage of spear thrusts struck swiftly. Even with his superior cultivation, the cultivator couldn't react in time. 3 direct hits landed on his vulnerable area points. His eyes widened in shock. "Impossible," he muttered as he was blasted backward through the air. Blood sprayed everywhere, staining parts of his robe despite its defensive properties, proof it was likely a low-grade item. Ye Jun accelerated, burning spiritual energy to boost the speed of her flying bamboo leaf artifact. From the side, she stabbed again with several more precise thrusts. Wounded and bleeding profusely, the cultivator did not falter. He swung his sword wildly, sending sword chi in all directions to block Ye Jun. He only needed a moment's breath to swallow a healing pill. His wounds would recover immediately. Ye Jun understood his intention. Without giving him a chance to catch his breath, she activated 5 more level 1 talismans and launched them at him in a continuous assault. As long as she kept up the pressure, victory would be hers. Blood poured from the Tongge sect's outer disciple. His wounds were deep and relentless. In agony, he cursed through gritted teeth, "That damn bitch," as he slashed his sword wildly in all directions with the intention of stopping her. Ye Jun swiftly dodged the wild blasts of sword chi. The moment a small opening appeared, she immediately thrust her spear forward, landing several more strikes on his body. The mysterious cultivator, who had been wildly slashing his sword in all directions, now found his divine sense thrown into disarray. Despite having robbed and killed countless low-level cultivators in the past without a second thought, this was the first time he had fallen into such a dire and disadvantaged position. "No, this can't be happening," he shouted in panic, continuing to lash out with chaotic waves of sword chi. Sweat poured down his face, soaking through his blood-stained robes. Blood and sweat mingled, drenching both his outer garments and the inner clothes beneath. For the first time, fear gripped his heart. Fear of someone whose cultivation level was clearly lower than his own. Until now, when slaughtering weaker cultivators, he had always looked down on them, barely even acknowledging their existence. And yet, here he was, on the verge of being slain by one of them, a humiliating reversal, like a mighty ship capsizing in a ditch. These thoughts raced through his mind as he blindly unleashed wave after wave of sword chi, desperately hoping to strike Ye Jun and end the threat. Ye Jun continued her assault, stabbing relentlessly while evading the flurry of attacks. The invisibility talisman she had activated only concealed her presence. It offered no protection. If she were hit, the consequences would still be grave. The talismans she had painstakingly collected over the years had now been depleted in great numbers during this battle. Even though he was in the Foundation establishment stage, if his body sustained too many wounds, bleeding profusely without immediate treatment or the aid of heal pills, his life would still be at risk. Amidst the chaos and disorientation, he failed to take even a single healing pill. As the blood loss grew worse, his consciousness began to fade, his body turning cold, and his spiritual energy falling into disarray. The opportunity came. Ye Jun quickly stabbed the spear straight into the middle of the mysterious cultivator's brain. The spear pierced from behind and through the front. Ye Jun withdrew her spear. The mysterious cultivator plummeted from the sky, his flying artifact following suit, having lost its spiritual energy connection. Standing atop her own flying artifact, Ye Jun looked down and let out a sigh of relief. This second battle, she had claimed victory at a reasonable cost. She dove down to catch the falling artifact and swiftly stored it in her storage pouch. The corpse dropped rapidly, crashing into the canopy of a tall tree. A sharp branch pierced through the body, going nearly 40 centimeters deep before stopping. Ye Jun flew down, grabbed the storage pouch still fastened to the man's waist, and quickly pocketed it before scanning the surroundings for her son's hiding place. She called out, Jun-so, come out quickly. We need to leave right now." Little Jun-so immediately deactivated his invisibility talisman. The mother and son took to the skies together, vanishing from the scene of the fierce battle. As they flew, Ye Jun felt her heart still racing. This was the first time she had taken a life. The feeling was indescribable. A strange and complex emotion lingered inside her, an unfamiliar weight that words could not fully capture. When the sensation finally began to subside, she could only sigh at the wretchedness of this world, so full of cruelty and wickedness. If she didn't kill them, they would kill her. The strong devoured the weak, and the weak had no means of resistance. Especially for farm like her, farmers who had no background or backing. Thankfully, she had her own combat techniques. If it had been like the old days, just the thought of it made her shiver. She clicked her tongue and sighed again, a bitter lament for the state of this chaotic world. She was someone from the modern world. Killing had never been part of her worldview. And yet, now she had been forced to face it head-on. It was a feeling far too difficult to express with mere words. Chapter 60. Ye Jun was currently at the Foundation establishment stage, and with a 24-hour window of experience validity period, she quickly flew away, putting as much distance as possible between herself and the battlefield before time ran out. She had no idea where she was going, only that she needed to get as far away as possible. Choosing a random direction, she flew off into the twilight, carrying Jun-so with her through the reddened sky. The little boy clung tightly to her waist from behind, his small hands silent and still. Throughout the entire flight, he said nothing. Perhaps he didn't quite understand what just happened, or perhaps he had already grown used to the sudden upheavals of this harsh cultivation world. Though he had learned much in theory, the cruelty of this world remained something unfamiliar and distant to him. They kept flying like that, on, until Ye Jun's spiritual energy, validity period by her temporary foundation establishment. Cultivation was finally depleted. Unable to continue, she descended onto a thick tree branch deep in a wild forest. The tree was overgrown with leaves and dotted with small fruits. They contained no spiritual energy, but at least they were edible, enough to fill the stomach for now. Ye Jun sat quietly on the branch, closed her eyes, and began to regulate her breathing, guiding her energy to restore a bit of spiritual power. Her breathing gradually steadied, and the sweat on her forehead dried. Meanwhile, Jun-so was full of child excitement. After sneaking glances at Ye Jun meditating and being careful not to disturb her, he darted away, hopping across the tree branches like a nimble little squirrel. He picked fruit as he went, his tiny face glowing with joy and his bright eyes twinkling with innocent delight. He didn't care whether the fruits held spiritual energy or not. As long as they were edible, that was enough to make him happy. When Ye Jun had recovered a bit of energy, she looked and saw Jun-so approaching, his hands offering her fruit. His mouth was sticky with juice, his clothes smudged with leaves, yet his face beamed with pure joy. In that fleeting moment, all her exhaustion from their long escape seemed to melt away. Even though he was now technically a young cultivator, even though he had witnessed a battle of life and death, Jun-so was still just a child who could smile, who could play, who still found wonder in the simple joys of the world, even in the cruel, unforgiving realm of cultivation. Ye Jun exhaled softly, gently patted his head, and said, "All right, I'll have a bite." This is the first wild fruit she ever eaten. She had rarely ventured outside before. The spiritual fruits sold in towns were expensive, far beyond what she could afford, so she almost never bought them. She took a few bites. The fruit was tart, with a hint of sweetness on the tongue. It wasn't bad at all. Slowly, she savored the taste, knowing full well that these fruits contained not a single trace of spiritual energy. In the world of cultivation, fruits and vegetables like these were seen as worthless, useless for cultivator, offering no aid to cultivation. But for the poor, especially rogue cultivators, simply being able to fill their bellies and keep their spiritual energy from chaos due to hunger, that alone was a small mercy. Yet as she looked around, she realized even these wild, edible plants were rarely harvested.
Why?
Because they grew in forests, and forests were home to demon beasts. Not every rogue cultivator could afford flying techniques or battle skills. Without those, entering these areas was tantamount to suicide. Death was what awaited them. Ye Jun trembled slightly at the thought. After that, Ye Jun looked at the remaining fruits and said to Jun-so, "Keep picking the rest from this tree. Store them so we can eat along the way. We've completely run out of food." Jun-so didn't say a word. He simply nodded, then darted across the branches with agile movements, his small hands busily plucking fruit. His face was lit with joy, as if he were playing some delightful game. He stuffed the fruits into his small storage pouch, casually whistling a simple tune, carefree and light-hearted. Ye Jun quietly watched her son, and before she knew it, a faint smile crossed her lips once again. It was a smile as light as morning mist, barely there, vanishing in an instant. That smile was also a silent farewell to the pain still dwelling deep in her heart, the pain of losing her second child. But life offered no room for collapse. Not when June was still here. Not when the road ahead still held hope. Moments later, the smile faded, giving way to the heavy thoughts that now flooded in. Where should she go now? All she had left were a few seeds, so few they weren't even enough to cultivate a single small field. She didn't know where to find more, nor did she know which lands were safe enough to settle and start over. Her entire life had been lived in a safe zone. Aside from farming, she hadn't learned anything else. Now, cast out into this vast world, she suddenly felt as small and fragile as a dewdrop on a leaf, adrift and directionless. The worries of the past had yet to fade, and new burdens were already piling onto her shoulders. One question echoed again and again in her mind, a question she herself had no answer for. What should I do now? A cultivator who has spent her entire life farming. How long can someone like that survive out here in the real world? This world had never been kind to the weak. Morning had fully broken. Sunlight filtered gently through the canopy, casting its golden glow over the sparse forest below. Insects chirped in harmony, and the soft gurgling of a stream weaving through rocks created a melody of comfort. Yet within Ye Jun, that serenity could not quell the storm of uncertainty that had raged inside her all night. Just keep moving. We'll figure it out along the way. When the water reaches the bridge, there'll be a boat. She whispered the old saying to herself, trying to find courage in its simplicity. And so, they resumed their journey. They flew at a very slow pace, conserving spiritual energy as much as possible. Ye Jun stayed vigilant, her eyes constantly scanning the surroundings. She knew too well that danger could lurk anywhere in this unfamiliar land, ferocious spirit beasts or cultivators with dark hearts who preyed upon the weak. She deliberately chose a path opposite from Tanga, flying far, far enough to leave everything behind. With a foundation-building cultivation base by a temporary experience token, and through careful energy control, they managed to fly nearly 1,000 li in a single day. But once her cultivation dropped back to qi refining, her speed drastically fell, only a few dozen li per day. Fatigue set in, and her spirits stretched thin. By the time dusk painted the sky in hues of amber, they were forced to descend onto a massive ancient tree for a makeshift rest. The tree was tall, with wide leaves, perfect for concealing them, at least for now. Ye Jun leaned her back against the trunk, her breath soft and shallow. Jun so nestled beside her, already drifting off to sleep. Despite his brave front, he was still just a child. His tiny hand clutched tightly onto his storage pouch full of wild fruits, as though afraid someone might steal them. Ye Jun gently stroked his hair, her gaze a tender mix of affection and sorrow. A breeze passed by, cool and damp, carrying the scent of the approaching night. She closed her eyes and began to meditate, trying to absorb what little spiritual energy in the air. After such an exhausting day, even a cultivator's body, superior as it was to ordinary folk, could only take so much. Prolonged flight had drained their reserves. With no proper food left, only a few wild fruits remained to keep hunger at bay. But those fruits held no spiritual energy, just enough to stave off starvation, not to replenish what was truly lost. If this continues, neither of them will last much hold out for long. She thought silently. By morning, she would have to search the reader, either for low-tier spirit beasts she could hunt, or, at the very least, edible wild herbs to regain some strength. When the first rays of a new day slipped through the dense foliage, Ye Jun opened her eyes. She gently shook Jun so awake and asked, "How are you feeling? A bit better?" Jun so rubbed his eyes and nodded, his voice still thick with sleep. "Yes, I feel great, Dad." Then quickly added, "Let's eat some wild fruit first. Today, let's try hunting some forest animals or find more edible plants." As he munched on a fruit, he looked up curiously. "Do you know which plants are safe to eat? There's so many out here." What if we eat the wrong one? His innocent question made Ye Jun freeze for a moment. Across 3 lifetimes, she had done nothing but farm, feeding daily on clean, nourishing spiritual grain. Open parenthesis rice close parenthesis from her spirit fields. No one had ever taught her how to identify edible wild plants in the deep forest. Something so simple, and she never gave it a second thought. She felt a tinge of embarrassment, then smiled. Well, if we don't know, we'll figure it out. Who knows? Maybe we'll stumble upon something edible. Fortune often favors the patient. Her voice was calm, but her eyes held a quiet determination. Jun So nodded firmly. Children were like that. Just one encouraging word was enough to light a spark of belief in their hearts. As for Ye Jun, even though doubt still gnawed at her, she forced herself to stay composed, for she knew, if she were to fall, there would be no one left for her child to lean on. As sunlight illuminated the entire forest and the morning mist gradually dispersed with the gentle breeze, Ye Jun and her son had already left their resting place and begun their journey through the dense woods. In Ye Jun's hand was a long spear, black as black iron, its sharp blade glinting coldly in the light. Beside her, little Jun So was flying along, carrying a long sword that was taller than himself. The blade was over a meter long, far too heavy for him to wield without using spiritual energy, but the boy still clung to it stubbornly, not letting himself stray a single step from his father's side. To Jun So, carrying that sword was like holding on to a belief that as long as he had a weapon, he could protect or at least help his father in some way. It was his first time going on a hunt. His eyes sparkled with excitement and curiosity. He secretly observed his father's every movement, learning how to place his steps and maintain balance. Ye Jun flew very slowly, cautiously scanning each area. Occasionally, she would signal to stop. Even while staying alert to her surroundings, she never let Jun So out of her sight. The forest was quiet, with only the trickling sound of a stream weaving through mossy rocks and the gentle rustling of leaves in the wind. Thanks to her cultivator's eyesight, Ye Jun could still see fairly well in the forest. But in an area where cunning spirit beasts might be lurking, eyesight alone was not enough. Though her cultivation level was only at the 8th layer of chi refining, still far from foundation establishment, and not yet at the cultivation level to use divine sense, thanks to her special experience card and practicing the Primordial Heart Sutra, Ye Jun managed to barely activate a wisp of his fragile divine soul. It was like opening a third eye, allowing her to perceive subtle movements within a few zhang open parenthesis about 10 meters close parenthesis around her. However, that thread of soul sense was too weak, too thin. Using it for too long caused dizziness, her mind drained as if all her energy had been sucked out. It hadn't been long before Ye Jun felt her vision blur and her breathing quicken. She glanced at her son. Jun So was still cheerfully tagging along behind her, his face full of anticipation. I must endure. I cannot collapse. For him, I must be stronger. After about roughly 1 hour, Ye Jun had to signal for a break. They landed on a large tree branch to rest. She leaned back against the trunk, closed her eyes, and slowed her breathing to recover, doing her best not to show any signs of exhaustion in front of Jun So. She knew all too well, she couldn't keep relying on this feeble soul sense. They had to find food soon. Chapter 61. More than an hour had passed. After resting atop the tall tree canopy, Ye Jun's soul sense gradually stabilized. The dizziness and fatigue faded, and her spirit became noticeably more uplifted. Once she confirmed she could continue, Ye Jun led Jun So away from their resting spot. The two descended to the forest floor. The thick canopy above made it impossible for her to spot any prey from the sky, and she couldn't rely on her soul sense endlessly. It was far too taxing. So they pressed deeper into the dense forest. Light filtered faintly through the layered leaves, leaving only scattered rays on the damp ground. The deeper they went, the more humid the air became, cold and heavy. Ye Jun's sharp eyes scanned the surroundings. They had passed countless plants and trees, all unfamiliar and oddly shaped. Can't just pick anything. Don't know what's poisonous. She can't risk it without being certain. Just then, whoosh! A sharp, slicing sound broke the stillness. Ye Jun instantly sensed a long object flying rapidly from the front. Activating her soul sense once again, she saw an enormous vine, as thick as a grown man's arm, whipping toward the pair at incredible speed, carrying a savage force as though it meant to crush them. Ye Jun's expression changed drastically. In that life-or-death moment, she didn't hesitate. Her right hand pulled out a first-grade fire talisman from the small pouch in her sleeve and slapped it firmly.
Boom!
A burst of flame erupted from the talisman, transforming into a firebolt that shot straight toward the incoming vine. The fire blazed brightly in the dim forest, igniting the tip of the vine. It screeched shrilly and recoiled back into the bushes. Wasting no time, Ye Jun spun around, scooping up the frightened Jun-so into her arms. She channeled her spiritual energy and shot into the air. Bursting through the thick foliage, she soared up and out of the forest canopy. The sky above was open and bright, forcing Ye Jun to squint against the glare. She panted heavily, clutching her son tightly to her chest heaving, just narrowly escaping danger. Her eyes turned cold as she looked down at the forest below, the place that had nearly harmed them. Though she was now above over the treetops, the dense foliage made it impossible to see anything with the naked eye. Closing her eyes, she activated her soul sense once more and slowly scanned the area beneath. Within moments, an image surfaced in her mind, a massive plant creature hidden amidst the dense vegetation. Burn marks from the fire talisman marred its body. Some of its vines had been scorched and now curled in pain. Ye Jun carefully probed its aura again, mid-stage chi refining, level 6. She let out a faint sigh of relief, then smirked coldly. Just a low-level demon tree, and it dared to startle me. Her sharp eyes filled with irritation as she let out a cold snort and shouted downward. Bastard. Just level 6 and you dare make a startle on me? Then she turned to Jun-so and said, Stay here and keep flying. Don't leave my soul sense range. I'm going down to deal with that demon tree. Jun-so nodded quickly. Though a little worried, he tried to stay calm, eager to watch and learn how his father fought. He hovered just above the treetops, staying close. Without delay, Ye Jun summoned her spiritual energy. Her figure shot downward like a falling star. She tore through the layers of thick foliage and landed directly above the wounded demon tree. In her hand was the black long spear, glinting with a cold, deadly light. Whoosh! Ye Jun's body flashed forward, the spearhead gleaming as it slashed straight toward the twisting vines. In the air. Although the demon tree was wounded, the moment it recognized Ye Jun's reappearance, it immediately roared in fury. Dozens of vine-like tendrils, as swift as venomous snakes, surged from all directions, radiating a murderous aura. Retreat. Close combat is dangerous. Ye Jun instantly realized. Without hesitation, she pulled out 2 talismans from her pocket, a level 1 water talisman and an earth talisman. Activate. The water talisman transformed into a gleaming blade of water, slicing through the air and hurtling straight toward the demon tree. The earth talisman became a sharp stone pillar, launching directly at the tree's body. Slash! The water blade tore through the demon tree's trunk, severing dozens of attacking vines. A deep gash opened, and sap spurted violently. At the same time, the stone spike pierced through the tree from behind, creating a massive gaping hole, with fragments exploded outward. Roar! The demon tree howled in agony and rage, but before it could retaliate, its body trembled violently, then collapsed with a heavy crack. Its form shattered by the stone spike, its vitality utterly destroyed, Ye Jun's spiritual sense confirmed. The demon tree's life force had vanished. The demon tree, dead in an instant. Ye Jun descended before the shriveled fragments exploded of the tree, its sap still lingering in the air. She walked forward, step by step, eyes as cold as ice. You dare to startle me? She sneered coldly, raised her spear, and shouted,
Chop.
Let's chop it again. Each strike carried sharp spiritual energy, smashing what was left of the tree's broken body. Sap splattered, mixing with shattered wooden shards. Take this, demon tree. Scaring me, are you? She muttered while venting her anger, the murderous aura around her still not entirely gone. After a few deep breaths, Ye Jun inhaled sharply to calm herself. She raised her head and called loudly, Jun-so, come down to me. Her voice echoed through the forest, shaking the atmosphere itself. The wind halted, the rustling leaves fell silent. But right then, Ye Jun's spiritual sense caught a faint movement in the distance, deep within the thickets. Something was approaching fast. A chilling intent brushed across her brain like a claw. Her face darkened immediately. Not good. In a flash, she launched herself upward like lightning, intercepting Jun-so before he could descend. The two met in midair, and Jun-so's expression was slightly anxious. Dad, what's happening? Ye Jun's gaze turned grave. In a low voice, she replied, Something is coming.
Fast.
I'm not sure what kind of demonic beast it is, but it's best we stay in the air for a while longer. We can't take any risks. Little Jun-so's cultivation was still low, only at Chi stage 2. He could hover for a few hours at most before exhaustion. Seeing this, Ye Jun immediately pulled out a treasure, a bamboo leaf. Stand here. Rest for a bit. She lifted Jun-so onto the bamboo leaf, which floated steadily in midair. Below them, the dense forest was unnervingly still. Both sets of eyes gazed downward at the battlefield below. Ye Jun closed her eyes and activated her spiritual sense again. A wave swept across the forest like ripples on water. Beneath the thick canopy, she saw shadows moving, silent and predatory, like hunting beasts. A demonic beast. She frowned. The smaller ones had already fled long ago. But now, something larger, more dangerous, was approaching silently, fast like a tiger, a panther, or a wolf. Beasts already vicious by nature, now infused with demonic energy, making them even more deadly. In a blink, a long, slithering shadow appeared in Ye Jun's perception, a demonic serpent. Ye Jun's face turned cold as her spiritual sense locked onto its cultivation level, Qi condensation stage 7. Only stage 7? The corner of her lips curled into a frosty smile. If it were stronger, she'd retreat with her child. But since it's weaker, looks like today's hunt just got interesting. Ye Jun chuckled softly and turned to Jun-so. Give me your sword. In the thick forest, her long spear would be hard to maneuver, so a long sword was the better choice. Gripping the sword hilt, Ye Jun's figure flickered like smoke as she shot down toward the demonic serpent, which was slithering toward the battlefield. Before it could react, she slashed directly at its forehead. Clang! The demonic serpent reacted in time. Its hard scales deflected the blade, producing a metallic screech. It roared in fury, whipping its tail like a massive steel whip. Ye Jun was flung into the air, her body staggering before stabilizing again, her eyes still icy. The serpent was no fool. It flicked out its tongue, sensing the murderous aura. In the next instant, it spat out a green poisonous mist. Poison! Ye Jun's expression darkened. She waved her hand and activated a fireball talisman. A blazing sphere of flame ignited, burning away the poisonous mist. At the same time, she chanted a wind spell to summon a breeze to carry the burning smoke away. The wind was weak, just a beginner's technique, so she had to summon many small gusts to push the remaining poison away in all directions. Taking advantage of that moment, she darted behind the serpent and brought the sword down on its neck.
Slash.
The blade tore through its scaled skin, leaving a deep gash as thick as a handspan. Sticky blood oozed out. The serpent hissed in agony, coiling its body tightly, then suddenly leapt up, spewing poison in all directions, attempting to escape. Ye Jun sneered, "Just a stupid demonic serpent." She shouted loudly, "Where do you think you're going?" Her eyes gleamed with killing intent. She activated another talisman, a water blade talisman. From the charm, a translucent blade of water materialized, gleaming with unmatched sharpness as it shot straight toward the serpent demonic. Slash. The serpent's long, sinuous body was cleaved cleanly in two. Blood sprayed in all directions. The smell of blood quickly spread throughout the forest. In its final moment, the serpent demonic still struggled to retaliate, spewing out a final puff of poisonous mist in a desperate attempt to drag its enemy into death with it. But Ye Jun had already ascended high into the air. A breeze swept through, dispersing the deadly fog away. Ever cautious, even as she soared above, she summoned several more small gusts of wind to carry the lingering poison far from the battlefield. Chapter 62. Ye Jun hovered silently in midair, her gaze fixed on the massive corpse of the serpent demonic lying motionless below. 30 minutes passed. Only when she was certain that not even a sliver of life remained within the demonic beast did she slowly descend. The long sword in her hand shimmered with a cold, icy light.
Slash.
With a few swift, decisive strike, the serpent demon's head was severed cleanly. It rolled several times before coming to a halt, its reptilian eyes still wide open, filled with hatred and defiance, even in death. Ye Jun walked over, expression cold, and stared down at the bloodied head. "So." Her voice rang out, low and chilling. "Spit your poison again. I dare you." Without waiting for a response, she chanted a command. A green light flashed, and the serpent demon's flesh vanished, absorbed entirely into her storage pouch. The pouch trembled several times, then fell still. "It's full." She frowned, glancing at the full of storage bag. Rumble. Suddenly, from the distance came a thunderous noise, like the pounding of countless beastly footsteps, wave after wave drawing ever closer. Ye Jun's expression darkened. Not good. 2 back-to-back battles, first with the demonic tree, then the serpent, had stirred up too much commotion. Not only had it shaken the forest, but it had also attracted the attention of even fiercer demonic beasts. Without wasting a single breath, Ye Jun shot into the sky, abandoning the pride and exhilaration that had followed her victory over the serpent. She stepped onto a bamboo leaf flying artifact, pulling little Jun so along with her. The bamboo leaf shot through the wind like a bolt of lightning, piercing through layers of mist as it raced away from the danger zone. Mere breaths later, a demonic beast with the appearance of a panther burst from the forest depths. Its eyes glowed crimson, nostrils flaring as it sniffed the air. Growling. It could still smell the heavy, blood-rich scent of the serpent demonic lingering in the air. On the ground below, only pools of dark blood remained, along with the serpent's mangled, severed head. And in the sky above, Ye Jun and her child had already become nothing more than a black speck against the horizon, swiftly leaving the danger far behind. High in the sky, wind streamed through Ye Jun's hair as she stood atop the bamboo leaf, flying artifact slicing through the clouds. She glanced back, her gaze softening as she saw her son still clinging tightly to the hem of her dress, his hair fluttering in the breeze. "We've got meat to eat today," she said, her voice tinged with a trace of excitement. "Snake meat. Tough, but tasty. I'd say at least a ton of it." Behind her, little Jun so gulped audibly upon hearing that. A clear droplet of drool glistened at the corner of his mouth, and his eyes sparkled like stars. He'd had snake meat a few times before. Just the memory stirred the hunger rumbling within him. Hunger. For days now, all he'd had to eat were a few wild fruits scavenged from the forest, some sour, some bitter, none enough to fill even the gaps between his teeth. As they flew, Ye Jun's mind replayed the 2 battles she had just fought. Too risky. Though her cultivation was a stage higher than the serpent demonics, she'd nearly lost. If it hadn't been for the attack talismans in her possession, the outcome might have been very different. She let out a quiet sigh. Military training useless. All the drills, tactics, formations she had once learned in the modern army, none of it translated well into this world of cultivation. Here, things didn't follow the logic of modern warfare. Victory and defeat aren't determined by skill alone, she murmured, eyes gazing into the distance. Nor by strategy, but by artifacts, spirit power, talismans. She'd won both battles, but it was luck that had tipped the scales. Talisman luck. Low-grade talismans, painstakingly stockpiled over years. If I didn't have them, she gave a bitter inward smile. Up in the sky, the bamboo leaf. Artifact open parenthesis treasure close parenthesis glided gently through the mist, maintaining a smooth pace like a bird soaring on the wind. Thanks to its special enchantments, Ye Jun's spiritual energy consumption was minimal, allowing her to sustain the long journey without strain. Not until early afternoon, when the sun tilted westward, they slowly descend, landing near the base of a massive ancient tree covered in moss. Ye Jun did not rush. Her divine sense spread out like ripples on water, sweeping across the area in a wide arc. After several breaths, once she was certain there was no sign of danger, she gave a slight nod. Let's descend. It's safe. The 2 of them landed on the cool, damp forest floor beneath the dense canopy above. With practiced ease, Ye Jun conjured a stone platform with a wave of her hand and began building a fire. She gathered dry twigs, broad fallen leaves, and bits of bark, forming a small pile. From her storage pouch, she retrieved a gleaming iron wok. With a simple incantation, she drew clean water from a nearby puddle and poured it into the wok. Then, a long slab of serpent meat was brought out, pale white flesh streaked with distinctive black patterns, marking it clearly as the flesh of a demonic serpent. She sliced off a thick portion and dropped it into the boiling water. A sizzling hiss echoed as the meat hit the bubbling surface, the rising steam carrying with it an enticing aroma. A few dried spirit chilies were tossed in. Soon, a sharp, spicy scent filled the air. Jun So sat beside her, his eyes fixed on the wok, unblinking. Each passing second felt like an eternity to the hungry child. Drool began to collect at the corners of his mouth. He could still remember the taste of that spirit rice open parenthesis grain close parenthesis porridge with serpent meat. Just thinking of it made his stomach protest. 30 minutes passed. Ye Jun lifted the wok from the fire and set it aside to cool slightly. When the steam had lessened, she used a knife to cut a generous chunk of tender meat, still steaming, and placed it into a wooden bowl before handing it to her son.
Eat.
This is your portion, she said softly, her voice gentle with maternal affection. Jun So pounced on the bowl like a starving beast. Cradling it with both hands, his eyes sparkled like stars. He took a large bite, chewing eagerly, his face blooming with pure bliss, the joy of a child enjoying a hot meal after days of hunger. This serpent meat, even without porridge, it's still amazing, Dad, he mumbled between bites. Ye Jun watched him quietly, a faint warmth blooming in her heart, but also a flicker of unease. She knew the path ahead remained perilous and uncertain, but at least, for now, they were safe, sharing a hot meal amidst the wilderness. Hunger was no longer an immediate threat. She spoke with calm seriousness. If your cultivation auras grow stronger, you'll be able to hunt beasts freely and have all the meat you want. So, remember to cultivate diligently, alright? Jun so bit off another large chunk and nodded rapidly, cheeks full. When I get strong, I'll hunt tons of beasts and eat to my heart's content. I won't ever go hungry again. Ye Jun chuckled softly. A vague memory surfaced, something about how, as one's cultivation increased, they would eventually transcend mortal desires like hunger. But she didn't want to spoil the boy's delight, so she said nothing more. After their bellies were full and their bodies rested, the pair didn't immediately set off again. Ye Jun turned her gaze to a nearby colossal tree. Its roots sprawled across the ground like ancient serpents, and its towering trunk seemed to pierce the heavens. They quickly flew up and settled on a wide, sturdy branch as a temporary resting spot and cultivation platform. High in the sky, wind whistled around them. Beneath the thick canopy, moonlight pierced through in scattered silver strands. The night was serene, broken only by the soft chirping of insects, a steady, natural rhythm accompanying their cultivation. Both Ye Jun and Jun So sat cross-legged, eyes closed in meditation, beginning to absorb the ambient spiritual energy of heaven and earth. With food in their bellies and their strength restored, cultivation naturally became their top priority. For Ye Jun, this truth was especially clear. She needed to grow stronger.
To survive.
To protect her son. Time slipped by in silence. The further they traveled from the spiritual-rich zones and blessed lands, the thinner the spiritual energy became. Cultivation grew slower. But not even that could deter her. Every breath of spiritual energy was precious. Even with poor talent, every moment of cultivation was a step forward. By midnight, the moon had begun to tilt westward. Ye Jun still hadn't opened her eyes. But within her consciousness, she quietly whispered, "System." A familiar interface appeared before her in her spiritual sea. She retrieved a chunk of serpent meat, weighing several jin, and placed it on the tray hoping, just this once, she might be able to convert some resources from the demonic beast she had risked her life to slay. Yet, just like before, an invisible barrier emerged, blocking the meat from entering the tray. The system refused for buying. Ye Jun sighed inwardly. She had suspected it already, and now it was confirmed. The system did not accept resources harvested by her own hand. Silently, she closed the interface and returned the meat to her storage pouch. She made no complaints, no outburst, just resumed her quiet meditation, letting time drift onward. It was a monotonous task. Repetitive. Tedious. Yet it remained the only road forward in this harsh world of cultivators. Or perhaps, simply the only way to survive. Chapter 63. In another sector of the Tonga sect. After a period of rushed preparation, all supportive medicinal pills for the impending war had been successfully refined and distributed. As dusk fell and golden light bathed the horizon, an internal meeting was once again convened at the main hall. Seated at the highest seat of honor was the Tonga sect master. His aura was dignified, his sharp gaze sweeping across the faces of the elders seated on either side of the hall. He spoke in a calm yet unmistakably troubled voice. "We have clashed with the demonic cultivators multiple times. Yet each time, we are utterly suppressed, despite our superior cultivation levels. If this continues, the consequences will be unpredictable. Judging from recent movements, it's likely the demonic sect is secretly preparing for a greater scheme. And when they make their move, I fear we won't have time to respond. Fellow elders, you have all witnessed the previous battles. Now, I wish to hear your insights." Silence fell upon the great hall. A heavy pressure hung in the air, suffocating and stifling. Nearly half an incense stick's worth of time passed before one elder finally spoke in a measured tone. "What if we tried to negotiate with the demonic cultivators? If their demands aren't too severe, perhaps peace talks could be considered. Coexistence might be better than senseless bloodshed." The moment his words fell, another elder slammed the table with a furious glare. "Negotiate with demonic cultivators? Humph. Those monsters have always been ruthless and immoral, treating human lives as worthless. We're the righteous path. How could we ever bow to such heretical scum? His voice echoed throughout the hall, like a solemn vow to uphold righteousness. He spoke as though the entire sect carried the banner of virtue, cherishing even the weakest of lives. Silence returned once more. After a brief pause, an elder with snow-white hair and a long beard finally opened his mouth with a calm and steady tone. A compromise may indeed be the most viable option for now. If their conditions aren't unreasonable, then avoiding further losses to our sect is something worth considering. Moreover, if the demonic sect truly harbors plans to launch an assault, they've likely already prepared some kind of secret weapon. If only we could ally with the DM sect, perhaps things would shift in our favor. But as it stands, his words, though gentle and incomplete, caused several others to nod in agreement. The Tonga sect master remained silent, yet a subtle shift flickered in his eyes. It was clear his heart was leaning toward avoiding war, seeking peace, if possible. If a treaty could be reached, then surely the demonic cultivators would turn their attention toward the DM sect instead. At the thought of this, a faint sense of relief brushed through his mind. He still held a grudge from the last time the DM sect had rejected their proposal for an alliance. Deep down, he was eager to watch as they reaped the bitter consequences of their arrogance. That thought alone brought a dark, quiet satisfaction to his heart, as though watching a grand play unfold on the stage. Somewhere within the territories governed by the Tonga sect, home to millions of rogue cultivators, spring had come. Normally, it should have been a season of sowing and renewal, when all things flourished with new life. But in this place, the breath of spring brought only grief. As time passed, scattered cultivators, those who had long outlived their natural lifespan, began to fall one by one before the unyielding laws of heaven and earth. With no life-extending pills, no sex to shield them, they could only fade away in silence and solitude. One small household after another, one roof after another, mourned in sorrow. The air was thick with mourning, gloomy and stifling, utterly at odds with the vibrant life spring was meant to bring. All understood that birth, aging, and death were natural laws. But these were cultivators, those who challenged the heavens in their pursuit of prolonged life. They sought the great Tao open parenthesis great road close parenthesis itself. Back at the main hall of the Tonga sect, after hours of intense debate among the elders, a final decision was reached to probe the demands of the demonic cultivators, to see whether a peace agreement might be possible. Only a few days later, finally prepared, set course for the ruins of Tonvan's sect, now a temporary stronghold of the demonic faction. Aboard one of the largest flying ships was none other than the sect master of Tonga himself. Within the shattered ruins, the demonic cultivators had long sensed the approaching disturbance. Crimson eyes peered from the shadows, and sneering chuckles echoed ominously through the air. So, the righteous sect return again. Since their successive victories, the momentum of the demonic cultivators had soared like wind-filled sails. Yet without the direct order of their supreme leader, DM Thong, none dared to act without permission. As the flying vessel carrying the Tonga sect master approached, the master flew forward, his figure transforming into a streak of blue light, hovering midair above the ruins. His immense divine sense surged outward, engulfing the surrounding space. His voice rang out like a bronze bell echoing across the land. I, sect master of the Tonga immortal sect, have come with sincere intentions to negotiate with the leader of your faction. Inside the crumbling stronghold, DM Thong, supreme leader of the demonic sect, furrowed his brow slightly, though his expression remained unreadable. He gave a brief glance to one of his trusted subordinates, a nascent soul-stage demonic cultivator. Understanding immediately, the man shot into the sky and descended before the Tonga sect master. He neither bowed nor offered courtesy. His gaze was cold as he spoke, voice echoing with disdain. If you've something to say, say it. Quickly. Amid the dark clouds that loomed overhead, facing the icy gaze of the nascent soul demonic cultivator, the sect master of Tonga spoke with a deep, steady voice. I have come to negotiate. So long as you agree to leave our sect untouched, Tonga is willing to comply with certain terms within reason. Speak. What is it your side desires? We may discuss. The nascent soul demonic cultivator frowned slightly, giving him a sharp, appraising glance. Then, in a flat tone, he replied, Wait here. This must be discussed with those above. You'll be notified late. With that, he turned and soared back into the ruins of the demonic base. Within the shattered city, DM Thong, supreme leader of the demonic cultivators, sat still as a statue. His gaze was abyssal, unreadable. Before the returning subordinate could speak, DM Thong said coolly, as though he had already anticipated Tonga's intent. We require only one thing: individuals with spirit roots. Age, origin, background, it matters not. So long as they possess spiritual aptitude, they are of value. His lips curled into a cold, half-smile. Tell them, if they wish for peace, they are to offer up cultivators with spirit roots. Once every 3 years, this will be their tribute. In return, we shall not cross into their lands. The nascent soul cultivator returned and relayed the demand word for word to the sect master of Tonga. A heavy silence settled over the sky. The sect master remained silent for a long while. The elders accompanying him immediately convened an urgent internal discussion. After many tense hours of deliberation, a grim agreement was reached. Every 5 years, Tonga would offer up 5,000 individuals with low-grade spirit roots and 300 with mid-grade spirit roots. In exchange, the demonic cultivators would not attack or trespass into Tonga's territory. Under no circumstances would high-grade spirit root cultivators be included. Although Langhu realm was part of the middle-tier realms and boasted abundant spiritual energy, cultivators with high or rare-grade roots were still extremely rare. To hand over even one would be an irreparable loss. Thus, the pact was signed. The war ended, not by triumph, but by treaty. When they returned to the mountains, the great hall of Tonga's sect was once again filled with gathered elders. A white-bearded elder folded his hands anxiously, offering those with low-grade roots that may be manageable. But mid-grade spirit roots, surely this will harm the very foundation of our sect's future. The sect master replied wearily, his voice hoarse. I negotiated to the lowest terms possible. This is the price we must pay for the sect's survival. Go and prepare. There is no other way. To high-level cultivators, those with low-grade roots were nothing more than ants, plentiful and expendable. Whether they lived or died hardly mattered. But those with mid-grade roots, they weren't geniuses, but they were seeds of future strength. To offer them up was akin to bleeding the sect itself. Yet, in an era where the chaotic ruled and mercy was a luxury, survival came first. In the end, they all nodded. Just 300, they told themselves. That was all. 1 week later, a formal decree spread across all territories under Tonga's rule. The proclamation echoed to every clan, village, and scattered group of rogue cultivators. Henceforth, every 4 to 5 years, the sect shall select the most exceptional among the people to fulfill a noble duty on behalf of the sect. The mission duration is indefinite. Those chosen shall be honored with elevated status. Their families shall receive a reduction of 8% in taxation and a 2% discount on essential goods. The mandatory 3-month servitude quota shall be waived for them. Families are encouraged to have more children. If young ones are present, they may fulfill the duty in place of adults. Nowhere in the decree was the true nature of the duty revealed. And to everyone's surprise, the rogue cultivator populace rejoiced. They believed the war had truly ended. They were glad for peace, glad for lower taxes, glad for lighter burdens. But they forgot something. None of the old taxes or policies had truly been repealed. There had been no actual change, only illusion. Still, that joy lasted no more than 5 days. On the 6th day, enforcement cultivators, public official, from Tonga began to spread throughout the land. They did not simply repeat the announcement. They issued commands. Every household is required to bear additional children. Those who refuse shall be labeled traitors and executed. All unmarried men and women will be paired and wed. Reproduction is mandatory. Refusal shall be treated as rebellion, punishable by death. In one elderly household, an old man stood trembling, his voice quivering. But the original decree from the sect, it never mentioned anything so harsh. There was nothing about killing. One of the public official cultivators casually placed a hand on the hilt of his sword, eyes glinting with cold amusement. Oh, you have an opinion? Care to repeat that clearly for everyone? The old man's gaze dropped to the hand resting on the sword. Cold sweat drenched his back. He forced a dry laugh. And no, of course not. What I meant was, we shall comply. Absolutely. Without question. The enforcer smiled faintly.
Good.
See that you keep it up. And so, the order spread across all rogue cultivator households, across countless minor clans and families. Everyone, without exception, was now obligated to reproduce, as a mandatory duty. Only one place remained unaffected: the commercial zones under the jurisdiction of DM's sect. There, the new decree held no power. The laws of Tonga did not reach that far. In various areas, some rogue cultivators, those fortunate enough to be on the verge of breaking through to the foundation establishment stage, were far from pleased. Childbearing would disrupt their cultivation progress, delaying their long-awaited breakthroughs. Yet the decree had already been issued by the sect. There was no room for refusal. Some pretended to comply, but deliberately took measures to prevent conception. No matter how cautious or meticulous they were, their defiance was eventually discovered. And once caught, there was no mercy. On a blessed day, an announcement echoed throughout the territories under Tonga sex control. In the central plaza and distant nearby regions, live images were broadcasted, depicting the public punishment and execution of offenders. Attendance was mandatory. Every citizen was required to witness. This was no ordinary punishment, it was a warning. In a single day, countless rogue cultivators and members of minor clans were bound and dragged to the execution platform. Nearly 60 individuals in total. They were lined up one by one, awaiting their fate. The onlookers trembled, not from the cold, but from fear that gripped their very souls. Yet, what could they do? To be weak was itself a felony. Chapter 64. No one understood why the sect had suddenly forced the people to have more children. An old woman mumbled, her face full of worry. What are we giving birth for? We're already struggling to survive day by day. Even a single bowl of spirit grain must be split into 3 or 4 parts. Do they think we're an animal? Beside her, a middle-aged man let out a bitter laugh. So, what if we know? Do they care? To them, we are nothing. They're up there, aloof and exalted. What are we in their eyes? He turned and walked away, his silhouette vanishing into the thin morning mist. Those who remained looked on in silence. Only the whistling wind could be heard, and a creeping chill filled their hearts as the last of the public executions ended. In the days that followed, households and small clans throughout Tonga's territory were systematically numbered. A random selection system was activated, and soon, 5,000 individuals with low-grade spiritual roots were chosen to fulfill the sect's duties. Then came the turn of those with mid-grade roots. Small family clans, often overlooked by the sect, became the primary targets, as many of them still had cultivators with untapped potential. But the numbers were still insufficient. So the sect turned inward. Among the outer disciples, those without backing, without status, without connections, became the next targets. They were performing mundane tasks, guarding gates, calculating inventory, transporting spirit herbs. None of them realized they had been chosen. They were simply told they'd be escorting rogue cultivators on missions. a task that seemed relatively safe. Some were even delighted, thinking it was a chance to gain merit. Perhaps they might even earn some extra spirit stones. In Tonga, skimming off the top was not uncommon. It was, in fact, encouraged by the higher-ups. After all, the commoners were but ants, worms, easy prey. Even those who dared question vanished in silence. Whispers spread among the populace, and no one dared to speak up anymore. Thus, corruption flourished, stretching across generations, endless and unchecked. Once the compulsory mission order were enacted, all exits and hidden paths were sealed tight. Cultivators patrolled day and night. Among the millions of households, those selected still did not understand their fate. They didn't know how long their loved ones would be gone, what the mission entailed, or if they'd ever return. Under the dusky twilight, people stepped out of their homes. Behind them, tearful eyes watched. An old mother pressed a few spirit stones into her child's hand, savings from 10 years of hardship. A little boy shoved a dried piece of spirit bread into his older brother's palm. Don't forget to eat. Don't stay hungry. Elsewhere, a whole clan gathered to send off a member. An elder's voice trembled.
Do well.
Return safely. At the same time, the selected outer disciples of Tonga's sect also prepared for departure. Some wore gleeful expressions, thinking it was a chance to gain recognition. Others dreamt of being taken as personal disciples by elders. A few calculated silently. How much did I skim this month? How much spirit stone went into my own pouch? None of them knew. They were marching toward the end of their lives. And as the edict rolled out, life lanterns, life tokens, jade life identity plaques, all skyrocketed in price. Even small clans hesitated to buy. Then came the day of departure. Over 10 massive spirit airships quietly lifted off from Tonga territory. In the sky, they sliced across the setting sun like dark blades. Inside, cultivators sat in silence. Only the steady hum of the spirit engines echoed, like the pounding of tense hearts. Elder from Tonga's sect personally oversaw the flyships. No mistakes were allowed. This was the first shipment, the beginning of the cooperation. Though Tonga was the dominant sect in the region, caution was paramount. An elder retrieved a jade transmission slip, his spiritual energy flickering. In an instant, a message flew across the skies, toward Tonvan territory, where the demonic cultivators were already waiting. First batch en route. Arrival in a few hours. Prepare for reception. Countless demonic cultivators stood waiting for the first shipment delivered by Tonga sect. Once the goods were received, they would be immediately transported to Western continent for pill refinement. When the flying ships descended at the designated location, 10 large vessels landed one by one upon an open patch of land. The demonic cultivators had been waiting long before, their faces gleaming with joy as if celebrating a bountiful harvest. The goods are here. Fresh and unbroken this time. Groups of rogue cultivators and outer sect disciples were ordered to disembark. From atop the stone steps, a Tonga elder looked down with a serene expression, as if he were overseeing the most ordinary of duties. He spoke in a loud, authoritative voice. Disciples, follow these honored seniors to complete your mission. The sect has high hopes for you. Without another word, he turned and soared back onto the ship, departing without so much as a glance behind. The outer sect disciples and rogue cultivators exchanged confused glances. Some frowned slightly as they observed the sly, malicious faces of the demonic cultivators. A faint, unsettling premonition flickered in their hearts, only to be quickly suppressed by their own reasoning. No need to worry, it's an official sect mission after all. But within half an hour, all doubts and all hope were erased. They were herded into a secluded region within Tonvan sect ruins and suddenly forced into an enormous caged array. Formation sigils flared to life. Spiritual energy within their bodies was sealed instantly. They could neither circulate their chi nor cast a single technique. A faint fragrance drifted through the air, sweet and gentle like a flower. Within minutes, Every one of them collapsed unconscious. When they awoke, they were naked, lying upon the cold stone floor. Muffled screams echoed through the chamber. Many female cultivators trembled, arms wrapped around their bodies, tears spilling silently as none dared raise their voices. Panic began to spread among the outer sect disciples. What's going on? What is this place? No answer came. Only silent, frightened stares. All were stripped bare. Then the stone doors opened, and one by one, they were dragged, by technique force, into a scorching tunnel, like a path leading into the heart of a volcano. Cultivators were thrown into massive pill cauldrons. Their bodies melted, merging with rare herbs, forming a blood-red liquid. Even in their final moments, their wide, terrified eyes still held the horror and agony of betrayal and death. No one saved them. As the brutal truth laid bare, despair overwhelmed the outer disciples. There was no way back, no escape. One after another, they were hauled into blazing cauldrons, hellish furnaces on earth. Their screams were swallowed by crimson flames. Their flesh dissolved, their souls shattered, until they were reduced to nothing more than dark red pill liquid. In the end, they became mere pills, neatly stored in porcelain jars, as if they had never been people at all. Just ingredients in a cultivation formula. The mission the sect had assigned them was to become materials for the demonic cultivator's cruel alchemy. Tanga's sect was no longer a sanctuary. It had transformed into a vast cage, imprisoning all weak and low-ranking cultivators, a silent prison without walls. By the time they realized, it was far too late to flee. The people living within Tanga's territory were no longer seen as humans, but as breeding machines, forced to function according to the whims of those in power. They were like industrial livestock, plucked clean, starved, yet required to lay eggs. And when the final egg dropped, they were cast aside, forgotten. There was no way out, no freedom, only slow decay and a death so quiet, no one would ever know they had existed. Within Tanga's sect, weekly ideological training sessions had become a fixed routine every Monday morning. All disciples, inner or outer, were required to attend before dawn, assembling in neat rows across the icy stone square. The wind howled past the stone steels engraved with the eternal teachings of the sect. As the bell rang, so too did the echo of shouted slogans, ringing across the square, not merely chanted, but delivered in piercing, fervent voices that seemed intent on tearing the very sky apart. The sect is glory, the sect is truth, the sect is life. To sacrifice for the sect is the ultimate bliss. A shattered body is honor, spilled blood is sacred tribute. We are the stepping stones for the sect's great Tao. To die for the sect is not an end, that is fulfillment. We need no reason to offer our lives. The sect is reason enough. Each phrase was repeated 3 times. Afterward, disciples were required to stand still, eyes closed, visualizing themselves dying in battle for the sect, being burned alive, torn apart, crushed into ash, yet all while wearing a peaceful smile, as though it were the greatest moment of their lives. Many outer and inner disciples initially found these brainwashing slogans deeply unsettling. They harbored doubts. But, day by day, fragments of their spirit were worn down, eroded until obedience became instinct, deeply etched into their minds. They could no longer tell where their own thoughts ended and the sect's will began. People cultivated for the pursuit of the Great Road, for longevity, to ascend to immortality. But in Tanga's sect, that pursuit had been twisted into something else entirely. Regardless of whether a cultivator was inner or outer sect, if they were deemed unimportant, they could become mere stepping stones to uphold the sect's great Tao. Or more accurately, to safeguard the ruling power of the upper echelons. Eternal. Unshakable. The slogans the sect repeated were never meant to inspire, they were designed to indoctrinate. Their sole purpose, to convert every cultivator into a mindless tool. One that obeys. One that sacrifices. One that never questions. Because when the time for tribute came, and the clans failed to provide enough people, it would be these ideologically cultivated disciples who were summoned instead. No selection process. No justification. Just the phrase they had all memorized and engraved into their brains. Offer your body to the sect. No one knew where they would be sent. The sect claimed it was a glorious mission, a trial to temper the will. But the higher-ups all knew. They knew those demonic cultivators had never come for peace or cooperation. Demonic cultivators, creatures who dared commit any atrocity. They captured cultivators with spirit roots to refine pills, or used their blood to draw wicked formation arrays. They transformed life into fuel, grinding souls into essence to extract power. And those disciples who were sent away never returned. They were not seen as lives to protect, but as stepping stones to sustain the sect's prosperity. That was what they were meant to become. All of them. No exceptions, unless they shared blood ties with the ruling elite. Chapter 65. Throughout Tonga's sect and across all the territories under its control, the families and clans whose members had been sent away to fulfill their duty for the sect waited in anxious silence. 2 months passed. No news. No returning sound transmission. Jade slips. Not even the briefest message. And yet, those families clung to their fading hope. Before sending their loved ones off, they had handed them high-grade sound transmission jades, powerful enough to send messages across tens of thousands of miles, even through forbidden mountains and sealed domains.
But now?
Nothing but deathly silence. Unease spread like wildfire. Some of the elders, those with high cultivation realms, burned with anxiety. They began to secretly spend spirit stones and resources, hiring people to investigate. They bribed officials within the sect, hoping for even the smallest clue. But what they received in return were cold, indifferent gazes. Shaking heads devoid of sympathy. Why the panic? They're working for the sect. Of course they'll return eventually. A cultivator clad in red robes embroidered with the symbol of Tonga lazily waved them off, like swatting flies. His tone indifferent, his gaze arrogant. The callousness of his words, the dismissiveness of his tone, it was enough to make blood boil. But even those with higher cultivation, when faced with sect officials, all they could do was bow, grit their teeth, and mutter submissively, "Yes, we understand." They returned home with heavy hearts, waiting by the day, tossing sleeplessly by the night. Some, unable to bear the uncertainty, began considering leaving Tonga territory altogether. Only by leaving could they tap into wider information networks within the sect's domain. All communication was dead. It was as if someone had intentionally buried the truth. But escaping? Not so simple. All exits were under strict control. Formations, spirit restriction arrays, patrol teams rotating day and night. To get out would require not only a high cultivation base, but the willingness to risk it all. Many made plans, then gave up. Their will faded. Their minds clouded. Dark clouds loomed endlessly over the horizon near Tonga, as if heralding an inevitable calamity. Back to the main characters. Thanks to their earlier kill of the serpent beast, Ye Jun and her son were no longer worried about food, at least for now. With ample beast meat, they had no need to descend for foraging, nor to risk venturing into the perilous, dense forests below. They continued flying, passing mountain range after mountain range, weaving over countless forests. 2 months passed, yet they still found no suitable place to settle down. Everywhere they went, demonic beasts ruled the land. While most weren't stronger than Ye Jun, could anyone truly predict what surprises might lie in wait? If her were to get caught in a territorial clash between demonic beasts, what would happen to the crops and herbs he was planning to grow? Would she be able to protect her son? In the wilds, no matter how abundant the spiritual energy, a place lacking cultivators and protective formations would sooner or later fall into chaos. If they truly wanted to live in peace, they would have to find a region with human cultivators, a place with people, structure, and safety. Fortunately, over the past 2 months, Neither Ye Jun nor little Jun So had encountered any attacks from aerial demonic beasts. It was as if an invisible hand had been protecting them, silently steering hostile creatures away from their path. Until one morning, Ye Jun was flying slowly through the sky when a dark mass appeared in the distance, like a thick cloud of smoke. At first, she paid it no mind. But as the distance shrank to less than a mile, her eyes finally registered the truth. It wasn't a cloud. It was a swarm of demonic crows. Each one was pitch black, the size of a young hippopotamus. They clustered in layers, overlapping one another midair, forming a thick, terrifying formation, like a malignant tumor festering in the sky. Ye Jun's expression darkened. With such a monstrous number of spirit crows, even if she risked her life, escape was nearly impossible. Worse still, the crows had clearly already sensed her presence. Each of them let out piercing, twisted screeches that sent shivers down her spine. From afar, the crows' cries echoed like the wails of demons. Jun So trembled with fear. Ye Jun didn't hesitate. She immediately dove toward the ground. From within her sleeve, she pulled out 2 underground move talismans. Hold tight. She handed one to Jun So, her gaze firm. Activate it and go underground. 2 flashes of light. In the next moment, both of them burrowed beneath the earth, gliding silently through deep layers of soil, quickly putting distance between themselves and the dangerous sky above. Beneath the surface, Ye Jun released her spiritual sense, scanning the surroundings. After sweeping a few hundred feet, her brows furrowed. She clicked her tongue. Unlucky, there's a demonic beast down here too. It was a giant demonic rat, curled up in deep slumber. Its body was the size of 2 elephants combined. Thankfully, its spiritual presence was weak, only at the 5th layer of qi condensation. Ye Jun could easily slay it with her current cultivation. But now wasn't the time to draw attention. If she startled the beast, the demonic crows above might instantly detect the disturbance. Even though she was in over 20 meters deep, there was no telling how far those birds could dig or dive. She motioned for Jun So to stay quiet, and the 2 of them cautiously changed course. As she was about to turn away and avoid the slumbering rat, Ye Jun froze, her eyes catching a glimpse of something in the corner of the underground chamber. Near where the demonic rat lay curled, clusters of ivory-white mushrooms were growing between cracks in the earth. Curious, Ye Jun narrowed her eyes and observed more closely. Some of the mushrooms had been partially gnawed, clearly by the rat, though it hadn't finished them. Each cap was round, about the size of an adult's palm, and looked fresh and thriving. Ye Jun thought for a moment. If the demonic rat can eat them, maybe humans can too? I wonder if they contain any spiritual energy. In her past world, rats were known for their intelligence, often choosing the most nutritious food first, and only resorting to scraps when no better options were available. She figured demonic rats in this world likely shared similar survival instincts. If so, these mushrooms might be valuable. Not wanting to miss the opportunity, she turned to her son and whispered, Jun So, stay here. I'll go grab a few of those mushrooms. Before the boy could even reply, Ye Jun vanished in a blur of motion. She darted between rocky crevices and gently plucked several robust white mushrooms, all while keeping an eye on the sleeping beast. On her way back, she quickly pulled out a spirit-preserving wooden box from her storage pouch, carefully placed the mushrooms inside, sealed it with a locking talisman, and stowed it away. Returning to Jun So, she took his hand and resumed their underground journey. Though movement below ground was far slower than flying, it was far safer. Sensing that the area above was temporarily safe, she let her son up through the soil. Immediately, she summoned her flight treasure. A bamboo leaf appeared and rapidly expanded in size. The 2 of them jumped on, resuming their skyward journey. Below them, it was still endless wilderness, forest after forest, mountain after mountain, without end. Since they had left the first settlement, months had passed, and yet there was no sign of human civilization. Only beasts. Everywhere they went was ruled by demonic creatures. Ye Jun's storage pouch had already lightened considerably. But what frustrated her more than anything else was her inability to hunt more demonic beasts. Not because she lacked strength, far from it, but because storage lacked space. Her current storage pouch was far too small, incapable of storing large spirit beast corpses or the valuable materials harvested from them. Every time she passed by a demonic beast and had to leave it behind, regret burned silently in her heart. If only I could afford a higher-grade storage pouch, Ye Jun sighed quietly. The mother and son continued flying without rest. Until one day, they spotted from afar an area dotted with houses and vast stretches of spirit farmland. Though the region was still surrounded by dense forests, the sight of human habitation brought a glimmer of hope to their hearts. Ye Jun gently descended, retrieving her bamboo leaf-flying treasure into her storage pouch, then took her son's hand as they approached the settlement. From a distance, a few patrolling cultivators had already spotted the two, but they merely watched without taking any action. Hand in hand, mother and son hurried along as fast as they could. When the talismans began to glow faintly, signaling their time limit was nearly up, Ye Jun extended her spiritual sense upward to scout the surface. Sensing that the area above was temporarily safe, she led her son up through the soil. Immediately, she summoned her flight treasure. A bamboo leaf appeared and rapidly expanded in size. The two of them jumped on, resuming their skyward journey. Below them, it was still endless wilderness, forest after forest, mountain after mountain, without end. Since they had left the first settlement, months had passed, and yet there was no sign of human civilization. Only beasts. Everywhere they went was ruled by demonic creatures. Ye Jun's storage pouch had already lightened considerably. But what frustrated her more than anything else was her inability to hunt more demonic beasts. Not because she lacked strength, far from it, but because storage lacked space. Her current storage pouch was far too small, incapable of storing large spirit beast corpses or the valuable materials harvested from them. Every time she passed by a demonic beast and had to leave it behind, regret burned silently in her heart. If only I could afford a higher-grade storage pouch, Ye Jun sighed quietly. The mother and son continued flying without rest. Until one day, they spotted from afar an area dotted with houses and vast stretches of spirit farmland. Though the region was still surrounded by dense forests, the sight of human habitation brought a glimmer of hope to their hearts. Ye Jun gently descended, retrieving her bamboo leaf-flying treasure into her storage pouch, then took her son's hand as they approached the settlement. From a distance, a few patrolling cultivators had already spotted the two, but they merely watched without taking any action. As they neared a spirit field, Ye Jun stopped at a respectful distance, more than 20 meters away, and raised her voice politely. "Fellow Taoist, may I ask what place this is?" The man working diligently in the spirit field looked up at the voice. Seeing Ye Jun from afar, though unable to sense her exact cultivation level, he assumed she was a wandering rogue cultivator. After all, he himself was only at the 5th layer of qi condensation, far weaker than the vague aura she exuded. He responded in a loud voice. "This is the village of the Lin clan. Fellow Taoist must be from elsewhere? Perhaps from the Tonggo region." His guess was quite accurate. This area was originally a gathering place for rogue cultivators who had once lived within the Tan sect's territory, but due to a lack of spirit stones to purchase residency rights at Tonggo, they had been forced to leave. A portion of them migrated here with the Lin clan, establishing a temporary living space within the forest. Ye Jun replied, "That's right. My son and I left Tonggo and are searching for a new place to settle. I wonder if outsiders are still accepted here." The man nodded. "This is just a temporary settlement. If fellow Taoist doesn't mind, you may register with the clan head." The Lin family clan always welcomes fellow cultivators. He pointed toward a large, newly built house at the center of the area. Ye Jun followed the direction of his hand with a faint smile. Both her and Junso's eyes showed a sense of relief. After months of wandering, they had finally found a place to rest. Upon arrival, Ye Jun was fortunate to be welcomed by a few members of the Lin clan, who led her to meet the deputy clan head. Though she couldn't discern his cultivation level, she remained respectful and courteous, and he did not forcefully probe hers either. During their conversation, the deputy clan head asked about the current situation in Tonga. Ye Jun answered clearly. Tonga now is lawless. Corruption is rampant, and the cost of living has skyrocketed. Rogue cultivators like us are constantly suppressed, unable to rise. In winter, we're forced into labor, and our daily rations consist of just half. A bowl of spirit rice porridge open parenthesis, grain close parenthesis. We barely have the strength to survive, let alone cultivate. She sighed and continued. They even forced us to learn some strange cultivation technique that drains lifespan when used. For low-level cultivators like us, how much lifespan do we even have to spare? I couldn't endure it anymore, so I took my son and left. But even after leaving, we were still charged a hefty fee. It's total exploitation, squeezing us to the bone. Her bitter account made the deputy clan head fall silent, sweat beading on his brow. If what Ye Jun said was true, then his clan needed to be even more cautious about the outside world's condition. Ye Jun felt a rare sense of relief having shared her grievances. If she had voiced such complaints back in Tonga, who knew whether someone might have overheard? She and her son would likely have been charged with treason. The deputy then briefly explained the current state of the area. After leaving Tonga, we discovered this place. Though it lies deep in the forest, it's been relatively safe for now. Over the past year, we've put in great effort to develop the land, eliminate demonic beasts, and establish this dwelling. However, the times remain unstable, especially with the looming threat of demon cultivators. We must be ready to evacuate at any moment if danger arises. He candidly shared the strength of the clan. Currently, the strongest member of the Lin clan is only at peak foundation establishment. Frankly speaking, we're not strong enough to be called a true clan. Even so, he arranged for Ye Jun and her son to have a small plot of land on the outskirts of the settlement to cultivate. He also mentioned that the clan could provide certain seeds, which could be purchased if needed. Ye Jun was deeply satisfied. She knew full well that in this world, seeds were heavily regulated. Most could only be grown for a single season and couldn't be replanted. This unspoken rule was enforced by the major powers. But as long as she had seeds to plant, she felt it was enough to restart their lives. At this point, Ye Jun pulled out a sealed wooden box from her storage pouch and showed the deputy clan head several white mushrooms she had gathered from an underground cave earlier. After examining them, the deputy nodded. These are mushrooms used to refine a low-grade fasting pill. They contain a mild drowsiness-inducing toxin. The pills aren't very valuable, just 99 fragmented spirit stones per piece. The taste is poor, but one pill can keep you full for an entire week. Ye Jun gave a small nod. While the fasting pill wasn't particularly rare or precious, if used properly, it could still be a reliable emergency food supply. Chapter 66. The designated area was densely forested. Ye Jun personally began the work of clearing the land, without asking her son to help.
She said,
We've finally reached a safe place. Now I want you to focus on cultivation and raising your level. Weak cultivation is the root of all suffering in this world. Jun so wanted to help, but his offer was gently refused. Obeying his father's words, he quietly sat down, began to meditate, and started absorbing spiritual energy to nurture her cultivation. Ye Jun turned his attention to the land before him. She then took out her son's sword and began chopping down the towering ancient trees. Dozens of tree trunks fell one after another. Afterward, she trimmed and processed them into large logs and neatly stacked them in a corner. Next, she cast an earth element manipulation art, uprooting the remaining stumps and clearing all debris from the ground. Gradually, the plot of land was transformed into a decently prepared temporary spirit field. Thanks to her cultivation at the 8th level of Qi condensation, the entire task took only 1 day. A cultivator's body was naturally stronger than that of a mortal, and as such, even large tree trunks could be easily moved by her. Looking at the results before her, Ye Jun smiled in satisfaction. End of Book 6. Like the novel, just support for the author by donate.